Well, here we are again. In this video, we'll be covering and ranking the Gold Box and 4 Souls Plus expansion items. Now, I've got a new plan for these videos. If I get something wrong in terms of a description or a ranking, you take to the comments and let me know. Cause when I'm done, I'll make a mega video combining all 3 of these videos with some changes and fixes suggested by you. I am well aware of the last video's Monstro's Tooth incident. This is my solution. Without further ado, 4 Souls items ranked, part 2. 9V allows you to recharge up to 2 items you control at the end of your turn. Like I've discussed with previous recharge-based items, you need to have good items to recharge for this item to be effective. Being able to use 2 items in the off turn you already used during your turn can be quite the advantage, but you may not always have 2 items to recharge, like I said. It's a powerful effect, but proves less than useful if you don't have any items to recharge. B tier. Guppy's Tail is a worse version of Mom's Purse. It allows you to loot 1 at the start of your turn, at the cost of having to discard 1 at the end of your turn. The highlight of this item used to be that it was a Guppy item, but now that the Soul of Guppy is no longer a guarantee, this item may not be as useful. Being able to loot 1 at the start of your turn is nice, but if you don't have a useless loot card to discard at the end of your turn, you might end up discarding things you really don't want to discard. B tier. Infamy simply allows you to take no damage on an attack roll of 1. Despite being kind of a worse version of Dad's Lost Coin, this item rises above all other prevent damage on a roll items due to the fact that a 1 is in 98.4% of cases a miss. Other take no damage on X items are likely to be less and less useful the higher the number is, but statistically speaking, Infamy is almost always great to have. S tier, easy. Mom's Knife is definitely one of the better damage up items. Upon rolling a 6 on a combat roll, you deal 1 damage to all other monsters, which if you can do multiple times, can allow you to kill some extra monsters in addition to the one you're attacking. Like all basic damage up items, this gets an S tier. More Options is just a better version of Options. Being able to look 2 cards deep in the treasure deck at the start of your turn is just nice. The additional purchase is also kind of helpful, but I just have a hard time ranking this a whole tier higher than Options. I've already explained the options in the first video, so C tier it goes. Placenta is a fantastic item. Getting a health up and negating combat damage on a roll of 4 is pretty sweet. Even if preventing damage on a roll of 4 isn't the best number to prevent damage for, it's still quite a nice bonus when paired with a health up. Like most stat ups, this gets an S tier. Skeleton Key is completely insane, and in the late game can be a decisive game winner. To be completely fair, you might need some other items to pull some crazy plays, but you don't need to use Skeleton Key as this Doomslayer Destroyer enabler. Skeleton Key can be used to take down weak monsters without wasting attacks. The reason this card is so good is the game itself is balanced around taking a finite amount of attacks, and removing that finite limit has some game-breaking potential. Having access to basically infinite attacks gives you so much freedom on your turn. This card gets an S tier for sure. Soy Milk is just not worth it. Upping dice rolls by 1 on your turn is not worth dealing 1 damage to all monsters upon dealing damage. There are niche situations where this works well, like if there's a low health, high roll monster on the board and a high health, low dice roll monster on the board, you can attack for the possibility of killing the first mentioned monster. I know that's a lot to process, but I'll just say it, stuff like this just happens very rarely. Unless you have an item that negates this item's downsides, this is just not worth it, almost ever. D tier. The Missing Page is kind of like an aggressive version of Dad's Lost Coin, re-rolling 5s instead of 1s. Forcing a player to re-roll a 5, a very good roll, can be very dangerous for them, as it will most likely roll lower than a 5. You won't often use the Missing Page on yourself, but like I said, it's a pretty useful aggressive item to have. You might be surprised, but I'm going to rank this thing as B tier. It's very useful for the late game, but the fact of the matter is, this thing does not help you very much. It drags other players down. I wouldn't go for this in the early game, because making enemies in the early game is just not a great idea. Try to be nice. You'll get a lot farther being well liked in the early game than you think you will, trust me. Crooked Penny is an item that might help you out and might not. When used, there's a 50-50 chance you'll either double a player's current sense or reduce it to 0. Obviously, if you have some form of dice manipulation, this item is incredibly useful. Crooked Penny can also be used on other players, hopefully to destroy their fortune instead of double it. Risking it for that crazy scent grab is a viable strategy, I won't lie, but be careful not to gamble too much or too hard. You'll pay big time if you lose. A tier. Fruitcake is weird. It has weird effects that don't really line up. A recharge effect that usually doesn't come into play because people won't pay attention to it, and is overall just really weird. When you use it, you roll. If you roll a 1, you loot 1, which is alright. If you roll a 2 or a 3, you gain 1 cent, which is kinda bad. And if you roll a 4, 5, or 6, you look at the top card of a deck, which is what you're probably gonna go for when you use this thing. In addition to this, each time a player rolls the same result twice in a row, this recharges, allowing you to use it a little more frequently. This item is a combination of a low-tier resource gain item and an informational item. It's just so weird, and I'd have to put it in C tier, I suppose. It's not awful, but the use cases for each thing you roll are all kind of really different, you know. It's not the worst item in the world, but come on, you can certainly do better. I can't believe it's not. The Butterbean is kind of just the Butterbean loot card, but an item. The only thing is, you can only really use this defensively because you have to use it on something that targets an item you control. Holding on to this is a nice deterrent for people trying to screw you over in the late game, which makes this pretty good. A tier. Lemon Mishap is a card that doesn't see a lot of use, which for what it seems to do is fair. When used, each time a player rolls an attack roll of 1 or 2, all monsters take 1 damage. This makes it slightly more likely that you'll kill a monster if you miss on a roll of 1 or 2, since you both take damage instead of just you. This item has more of a use than you might think. In addition to being able to sell its use to other players, this item can be especially useful when there's abundance of monster slots and a few 1 to 2 health monsters. The chance of killing a couple of these little monsters with this makes it certainly worth using during these situations. Too many people consider this item worthless. While personally I think it's niche, I do think it has its uses every so often. C tier. Library card can be tapped to play an additional loot card this turn. With how simple this card is, I doubt I need to go into any extensive details about how useful an additional off-turn response is. We all know it's great. Keep in mind, this card essentially grants you an extra opportunity to play a card. The usefulness of that play depends entirely upon the card being played. One final thing to note, this card is exceedingly useful for characters who cannot play loot cards in the off-turn, like Blind Johnny or Captain Viridian. Still, this thing gets A tier. A Ouija board allows you to search 4 cards deep in the monster deck, specifically for an event card. You then throw the cards you didn't pick away at the bottom of the deck. You don't have to reveal the event and activate it if the event sucks. You can just banish it to the bottom of the deck like the others if you choose to. The only issue with this card is it can end up throwing away monsters that might have been useful for you attack. Oh well, B tier. Plan C is a nefarious single-use late-game power play card. Say that 5 times fast. When used, it will kill a monster, and at the end of the turn, every player. You'll mostly see it used when the user has but a single soul left to grab, and its negative no longer matters. However, you can also use this item to rush a Soul of Wrath. If 2 players have already died and you are in a 4-player game, you can use this on your turn to kill everyone and a monster, possibly gaining not 1, but 2 souls. Very powerful stuff here, but remember, this card will kill you too. Still, SS tier. The Bible is a beacon of versatile utility, and every time I see it, I jump at the chance to claim it as my own. The Bible allows you to choose from 3 effects when used. First is to destroy a curse. Not only does this make you all but immune to curses, it also opens up barter potential, allowing cursed players to pay you to rid them of their curses. Secondly, and likely the effect you'll use the most, cancel your attack. This effect is invaluable, negating most, if not outright all risk from attacking monsters or players while you hold this. The ability to back out of a losing battle is something incredibly powerful in a game where death is so punishing. The third effect is not often used, but when it does, it likely wins games right then and right there. The ability to instantly kill 4 different mega bosses is absolutely nuts when it happens to come into play. Again, it usually won't, but when it does, you'll feel its power. It should shock nobody that this item is a guaranteed S tier. What a godly support item. The Butterbean is a meme item. It doesn't do anything. It gets F tier. I have nothing to say about it, because it doesn't do anything. Some people will argue that it should be in D tier because it doesn't technically negatively affect you, but it does. Say you, well, buy a treasure off the top. You get this thing instead of something useful. You've just lost 10 cents for this useless thing. I'm putting it in F tier. Just, it's bad. Dad's Key allows you to place the top card of a monster deck in a slot not being attacked for the cost of 1 loot card. This support card is alright. 1 loot can be a steep price to pay sometimes, but if you have some less than stellar cards in your hand, it can allow you to attack a new monster without risking the randomness of the top deck. That 1 loot cost brings it down a little though, B tier. Succubus can be an incredible defensive option for a player to have. Simply holding it means that as long as you have 3 cents, you can make not 1 but 2 responses on any turn. If you have this card, make sure to always have at least 3 cents on hand. The mere possibility of having a response will be enough to ward away most players. A tier. I feel like 1-Up would be a much better card if it was worded just a little differently. If you happen to die on your turn while holding this, the card is consumed, your death is prevented, and you heal to full HP. You may then attack an additional time this turn. The issue I have with this thing is that it only affects death on your turn, not anyone else's. Why is that? I don't know, ed balance. The fact it does not protect you in the off turn really makes this less than what it could be. A C tier. Abaddon is a risky but powerful item. What other item gives you a flat 3 damage up? Of course, with this incredible upside, there's a price to pay. Whenever you take damage, you just die. Not great. No amount of health ups are going to help you on this one, but damage prevention is going to be your best buddy. Remember that low health characters like the Lost can use this item with no consequences. Makes you think. Despite its challenges, having a damage stat of 4 means you one-shot most monsters and bosses. Like I said, very risky, very rewarding. Due to the fact that player interference is a thing, i.e. some other player could just touch you or sneeze on you and you just die and lose stuff, this gets B tier. Cursed Eye is a bit like a lighter version of Abaddon, with a lighter good effect and a lighter bad effect, but honestly, the bad effect ends up being kinda useful more often than not. When you roll a 6 during combat while holding this, you add 3 damage to however much damage you would deal in that instance, which is great. Dealing a shitload of damage is just awesome, we just discussed that. However, when you roll a combat roll of 1, your turn ends and everything that has not been resolved gets cancelled. This sounds kinda bad, but if you plan your turn around this, it can end up saving you from death. Just try to get everything you want to do on your turn done before you attack. That way, it's possible you escape the attack instead of dying if you are less than successful. I'd give this item an A tier. It's risky, unreliable, but both its effects tend to be kinda handy. Daddy Longlegs is a card that's value is quite easy to see. Starting a turn with dealing damage to a player or monster is useful at any point in the game. You can use it to kill a monster with 1 health, lower the health of a monster you plan to attack, or put a player in an unsafe position. Daddy Longlegs is a fantastic card to have at any point in the game, and that grants this an S tier. Euthanasia is a card that seems a lot better than it really is. It allows you to instantly kill the monster you're attacking if you roll the same dice roll twice in a row during an attack. This seems well and good until you do the math, do a little calculations, and realize this has a 1 in 36 chance of occurring naturally. Unless you have some form of dice manipulation, you won't often see this come into play. Sorry to disappoint all you people who thought it was masterfully good. B tier. Game-breaking Bug is a fantastic, aggressive, and support item. While you hold this, you can reroll one of any player's items whenever they roll a 1, including yourself. This not only means you can reroll other players' more valuable items, but you can also reroll your own bad items. This item is generally useful at all points of the game, and I would go for it if I saw it. S tier. Guppy's Eye is a fantastic card for so many reasons. Buying this forces all other players to play with their loot cards revealed, making all players completely unable to hide anything from you. A good player will always be able to see exactly what everyone is playing while they hold this. This card is absolutely one of the best out there, and is hands down the best informational card in the game. No question about it. In addition to that, this card counts towards the Soul of Guppy, which, if it's in play, makes this even better than it already is. What a card. God damn. S tier for sure. Head of the Keeper is one of the best resource gain items in the game, but it comes with the risk of needing to attack to make use of it. It states that each time you deal damage, you gain a cent, and each time you kill a monster or player, you gain 2 cents. Let's say on average a monster has 3 health. If you deal 1 damage and manage to kill it, That means you'll gain 3 cents for each time you dealt damage, and an additional 2 cents for the kill, on top of whatever reward the monster already gave you. As long as you have monsters to attack, you'll quickly amass some easy money with this item. A tier. Hourglass allows you to deactivate an item each time a 2 is rolled. This aggressive item is meant to deprive players of using their items, obviously. This item tends to be more useful in the late game, when players have refined their inventories, and depriving them of a use of their active item is far more useful. In the late game, every play counts. Even a single misplay could cause your undoing. Not all powerful items are active items, though. Due to this item only affecting actives, it gets a B tier. Lard is an extremely powerful 2 health up, with a crippling downside. Each time you take damage, you discard a loot card. In situations where you already don't have many loot cards, this item can be amazing, but when you've got a lot in your hand to lose, this card can ruin games for you. It all depends on what you have when you get it, making it a very situational item. For all that, I'm giving this thing a B tier. It might be a massive help or a massive hindrance, and that makes me feel it belongs in the dead center. Magnet is a simple resource gain item, but due to its effects, it isn't the best one out there. While you have Magnet, whenever someone gains cents, they must give you 1 cent. This means a lot of people are going to be kind of annoyed with you, given you've just established an income tax in 4 Souls. This can lead people being more likely to choose you to make an aggressive move on, all for you just taking cents from them. People being mad at you for stealing their pennies is just not really that worth it all the time. I can't deny you can get some money with this, but the hate that comes with it may not be worth it. B tier. Mom's eyeshadow is absolutely amazing and causes whoever holds it to control so much of the game. When a player declares an attack on a monster, whoever holds this is allowed to choose what monster they attack with no penalty. This item was begged by fans to be reworked in version 2, but no dice. Controlling this allows you to force players into unwinnable fights, make them pay to attack monsters they want to attack, and all kinds of overpowered nonsense. The only way to avoid its effect is to attack the top card of a monster deck, which is inherently risky unless you have prior knowledge. By far one of, if not the best control item in the game. S tier. PhD is just handy. It allows you to add or subtract 1 to non-combat rolls. Being able to do this with every single non-combat roll means you are almost 3 times as likely to get the outcome you want. Pills and events will almost always benefit you while you hold this. A tier. Polyphemus gives you a straight 2 damage up at the cost of monsters having their dice rolls increased by 1 when it's your turn. This helps you defeat tankier, not super hard to hit monsters who you don't want to risk attacking for too long, but it might impair you against monsters who are already hard to hit, making attacking them even harder. It's up to you whether you want to take the risk, but the payoff can be well worth it. A helpful hint, if you have this, try and get an item like meat to offset the dice roll problem. Then you've got some real fun stuff to work with. A tier. Rubber Cement allows you to roll whenever you miss an attack. If you roll a 1 through 3, you get to deal damage to a monster or player of your choice. This allows you to make back on a missed attack 50% of the time, or if you're attacking a monster you think you can handle, deal damage to an especially weak monster you aren't attacking, allowing the possibility of killing 2 monsters in 1 turn. Of course, you can also use this item to deal damage to other players, making this item powerful and versatile. A tier. This item can just always come in handy. Telepathy for Dummies grants you the ability to roll a dice roll at the start of your turn for this item. You may then substitute your next roll this turn with that roll if you feel like it. This item's usefulness depends on what you roll and the situation you use that roll in. I could go into how higher rolls benefit combat, or some events benefit lower rolls more, but it's better just to say this item might help you out, and it also might not. C tier, just kind of, okay. Just like in the video game, the whiz is a horrible excuse for an item. Monsters gain 1+ dice roll on your turn while you hold this, and in exchange, each time you deal damage, you can deal it to another monster or player? The dice roll increase is just not worth that. Yes, you can use it to deal damage to weaker monsters or harass players, but again, this item is not even close to worth it. For almost all intents and purposes, this item is essentially a worse version of soy milk, an almost equally as bad item. Purchasing this is almost a guaranteed misplay. D tier. 2020, wow, starting the actives for 4 Souls Plus off strong, eh? Being able to add up to 2 to an attack roll is fantastic and can really save your butt in a bad situation. Widening the window of success by 33% is a great example of a good item, but sadly this item only affects attack rolls. Still, fantastic to have around, and you will get so much use out of this. S tier. Black Candle cuts 6 cards deep into the monster deck, revealing them to other players. Then you are allowed to give any curses to whoever you want before throwing all the other cards away. This is mostly used as a weirdly inconsistent aggressive item, or something to clear out the top 6 cards of the monster deck. Clearing out that top 6 cards can definitely be of use, especially if there's a certain undesirable card in there. But besides that, this card is way too inconsistent to be ranked any higher than C tier. Distant Admiration allows you to choose a player, and that player then gives you one of their loot cards, which you must then play without using a loot play. What makes this item so handy is that using it does not cost you a loot play, but allows you to play a random loot card. So even if you'll get the worst loot card a player has, you'll be able to gain its effect without using a loot play, not depriving yourself of options. Another thing to think about is that you have just deprived a player of a resource without using any resources yourself, if resources in this situation are loot cards. A lot of people underrate this card. Honestly, I think it's A tier, just all around useful due to that no loot play deal. Divorce Papers are a single-use item that allows you to choose a player and nab half their money and loot cards rounded down, and then they give you an item. Being able to deprive a player of that many resources is incredible. The strongest part of this item is its effect on loot cards. Using this on a stacked player can cripple them for the remainder of the game and give you a massive edge to win. You can also use this on a player with only one item, forcing them to give you that single item, which is always handy. This item can really turn the tide of a game in an instant, just don't let it get butterbeaned. S tier. Forget Me Now is only really used when the user has 0 souls or is a last-ditch effort to prevent someone else from winning. I have seen this single-use item extend games by hours, so it's no surprise it isn't too well liked. That's kind of all this item does, extends the game by destroying one of each player's souls. Gives you more time to rise up and win, it's whatever, B tier. Head of Krampus really isn't that great. When used, you roll with a 50% chance of dealing 1 damage to all monsters or all players, including you. This item happens to be both situational and risky. Not a good combo. You could try and use this aggressively in the late game or for doing extra attack damage, but since both have a chance of failing, this gets a C tier. Attacking players and attacking monsters are totally different situations. It doesn't really help the item that it's all up to chance. Libra is okay. Changing a dice roll to a 3 can help in a decent amount of ways, like with some pills and events. Can help you get a winning attack roll on a monster with 3 dice roll or less, or bring down another player attacking something higher than that. Like the roll this item changes dice rolls to, this item is sorta middle of the road. B tier. Mutant Spider is one of the best dice manipulation items in the game. When used, it allows you to reroll a dice roll with 4 dice, allowing you to choose the result out of the 4. This makes this item super versatile, as you are super likely to get whatever roll you want with this, whether it's for an event, an attack, or another item. This will definitely help you a shit ton. One problem with this item though, you cannot react with this item. It states the next time a player would roll a dice, meaning you cannot use this to alter a bad roll. In addition to this item can actually be countered by any item or prompt that makes someone roll a dice. If someone uses this, someone could respond with something as lowly as a butt penny and waste its effect. This makes it a little worse, but still, this item takes an S tier spot. Rainbow Baby benefits all players. When used, all players can either loot 1, which is great, gain 2 cents, which is okay, or take 1 damage, which can be used for risky aggressive plays. This item is risky to use sometimes, as using it will either strengthen other players as much as it strengthens you, or deprive other players as much as it deprives you. The ability to kill other players with this does make it quite useful in the late game, but again, it does put you at risk when you use it like that. B tier. Red Candle is a bit like an attack-based crystal ball. When used, you choose a number between 1 or 6. Till the end of the turn, whenever that number is rolled, you deal 1 damage to a monster or player. While it is versatile, it is also very inconsistent, and you may or may not get good use out of this. It's up to fate. However, since its attack lasts till the end of turn, you may have many more opportunities to roll the number you picked, and for that, I'll give it A tier. Smartfly is another handy-dandy informational item that allows you to take a peek at the top card of a deck and, if you wish, put it at the bottom of a deck. In addition to this item recharges every time you take damage, meaning you'll be able to keep tabs on cards coming into play very frequently. This card nets you an above-average amount of control over the decks with just how often you can use it, and I'm surprised more people don't recognize that. This gets a B tier. Atame can be a very dangerous aggressive card that can sap resources from other players at the cost of your own. This paid item requires a loot card to be used, and when it is used, you force a player to discard 2 loot cards. Discarding 2 loot cards for every time you use this can be massive, and you can easily flush a player's hand if you have a couple bad loot cards to use. This item is much more powerful than people give it credit for, but it will definitely make you a huge target. A tier. Another haunt item to finish things off. While you hold this, your character does not recharge at the start of your turn. This usually makes you unable to play loot cards in the off turn, making you vulnerable and easy to mess with. This item sucks and has no upside. It's a haunt item. Remember, if you can sacrifice or destroy this in any way, you probably should. F tier. 2 down, 1 to go. If you'd like to take a gander at the full tier list, take a look in the description and join the Discord. As always, thank you for watching the video, and again, liking and subscribing helps me out quite a bunch. I've been Raider Wyche, take care.